The orphaned girl donates blanket to homeless man, unknowingly reuniting with lost brother in a moment that would forever alter both their fractured lives. Sophia Parker stood at the edge of the park, her thin fingers clutching the carefully folded patchwork blanket against her chest as if it were a shield. Winter had descended upon the city with cruel indifference, painting the world in shades of gray and stealing the warmth from everything it touched. At 19, Sophia carried herself with the quiet dignity that comes from weathering too many storms too early in life. Her dark hair, pulled into a simple ponytail, framed a face that rarely revealed the depth of emotion churning beneath her calm exterior. 10 years had passed since the fire that claimed her parents and separated her from her older brother, 10 years of foster homes and borrowed bedrooms, of learning to pack her life into a single suitcase at a moment's notice. The blanket in her arms was one of the few constants. A kaleidoscope of colors and fabrics stitched together by her mother's hands long ago, it represented the fragments of family she had once known, held together by threads of memory that grew more tenuous with each passing year. "You don't have to do this," her roommate Ellie had told her that morning, watching as Sophia added the blanket to a box of donations for the homeless shelter where she volunteered. "That blanket is practically sacred to you." Sophia had smiled, the gesture not quite reaching her eyes. "Maybe that's exactly why I should give it away. Some things aren't meant to be kept forever." But now, standing in the biting December air, doubt crept in. The shelter was still 6 blocks away, and with each step, the blanket seemed to grow heavier in her arms. She had nearly convinced herself to turn back when she spotted him. The man sat huddled on a park bench, his shoulders hunched against the cold, his weathered hands rubbing together in a futile attempt to generate warmth. He was youngish, perhaps in his late 20s, though hardship had etched lines around his eyes that suggested a much longer life. His beard was unkempt but not overgrown, and beneath layers of tattered clothing, there was a suggestion of someone who once stood taller, prouder. Something about him called to her. Perhaps it was the way he stared at the frozen pond, not with the vacant gaze of someone broken by circumstance, but with the focused attention of someone remembering better days. Before she could second-guess herself, Sophia crossed the frost-covered grass toward him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft against the winter silence. He looked up, startled by her presence, and for a fraction of a second, Sophia felt a strange flicker of recognition, something in the shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw. But the moment passed as quickly as it had come. "I thought you might need this." She extended the blanket, suddenly feeling foolish. What was one blanket against the overwhelming reality of homelessness? "It's not much, but it's warm." The man's hands, chapped and red from exposure, hesitated before reaching out. "Are you sure?" His voice carried an unexpected gentleness, a hint of education or refinement that life on the streets hadn't completely erased. "I'm sure," Sophia replied, though her fingers lingered on the colorful fabric for a moment longer than necessary. As the blanket passed between them, their hands briefly touched. The contact lasted less than a heartbeat, but Sophia felt an inexplicable jolt, like a current of electricity or recognition. "Thank you," he said, carefully unfolding the blanket and examining the patchwork of fabrics. He ran his fingers over a square of deep blue material patterned with silver stars, and something in his expression shifted. "This is beautiful. My mother made it," Sophia found herself saying, though she rarely spoke of her family to strangers. "A long time ago." The man nodded, a shadow passing over his features. "I had a blanket like this once. Not the same, but—" He trailed off, wrapping it around his shoulders. "Thank you." "Really?" Sophia nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with the emotion tightening her throat. "Take care," she murmured, turning to leave. "Wait," the man called after her. "What's your name?" She hesitated, caught between caution and an inexplicable pull to answer. "Sophia." He seemed to taste the name, rolling it over his tongue as if testing its flavor. "Sophia," he repeated. "I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you, Daniel." The words felt strangely inadequate, like puzzle pieces that almost but didn't quite fit together. As she walked away, the winter air seemed sharper against her skin without the blanket's weight in her arms. Still, beneath the cold, a curious warmth had kindled in her chest, the simple satisfaction of having done something kind, or perhaps something more elusive that she couldn't quite name. What Sophia couldn't see was how Daniel's hands trembled as they traced the patchwork squares, or how his eyes followed her retreating figure with a hunger that had nothing to do with physical need. He didn't call after her again, though every fiber of his being urged him to. Instead, he pressed his face against the blanket and inhaled deeply. Beneath the sense of dust and storage, there lingered the faintest ghost of lavender and vanilla, his mother's favorite perfume. And in that moment, memories long suppressed came rushing back with the force of a tidal wave. Daniel hadn't always been homeless. Once, he had been Daniel Parker, the protective older brother who read bedtime stories to his little sister, who promised her the moon and stars when their parents fought, who held her tiny hand as they watched flames consume their childhood home. "Don't worry, Soph," he had whispered as emergency vehicles cast red and blue shadows across their tear-streaked faces. "I won't let them separate us." But promises made by 12-year-old boys rarely stand against the machinery of an overwhelmed foster care system. Different relatives, different homes, different states. Contact lost. Letters returned unopened. Years passing like falling leaves, inevitable, unstoppable. After aging out of the system, Daniel had searched. 5 years of increasingly desperate attempts to find the sister he'd promised to protect. His spiral into homelessness hadn't happened all at once. First came the student loan debt from the social work degree he'd pursued to understand the system that had failed them. Then the obsession with finding Sophia that cost him jobs, relationships, eventually his apartment. Now, wrapped in his mother's handiwork, Daniel felt the crushing weight of a universe that had brought his sister close enough to touch without revealing their connection. The cosmic cruelty of it tightened around his heart like a vice. He spent that night on the park bench, the patchwork blanket his only barrier against the bitter cold, afraid that leaving might somehow sever this tenuous thread of connection. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by dreams of a family made whole again. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the sun transforming frozen dew into diamonds across the landscape. Daniel folded the blanket with careful precision, tucking it into his weathered backpack before making his way to the shelter where he occasionally found refuge. St. Martin's Shelter occupied a converted church on the edge of downtown, its stone exterior imposing but its doors perpetually open. Inside, volunteers served breakfast to a scattered crowd of regulars, the invisible citizens of a prosperous city. Daniel had just accepted a steaming cup of coffee when he saw her again. Sophia moved among the tables, clipboard in hand, speaking softly to shelter residents. She wore her volunteer's badge pinned to a simple gray sweater, her hair now twisted into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. She looked smaller indoors, more vulnerable somehow, though her movements carried the same quiet determination he remembered from their brief encounter. He watched her from behind his coffee cup, heart hammering against his ribs. What were the odds? Coincidence seemed too flimsy an explanation, yet fate too convenient. When she turned and spotted him, recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by a tentative smile. "Daniel Wright? From the park?" He nodded, afraid his voice might betray the storm of emotion raging inside him. Up close, the resemblance to their mother was even more striking. The same arch of eyebrows, the same constellation of freckles dusting her nose. "How's the blanket working out?" she asked, gesturing to his backpack. "It's perfect," he managed. "Warmest night I've had in months." Something softened in her expression. "I'm glad. I was worried after I left that maybe I should have given you more. It was getting so cold." "The blanket was more than enough," Daniel assured her. "It means a lot." A call from across the room interrupted them. Another volunteer needing Sophia's assistance. "I should get back to work," she said, "but it's good to see you came to the shelter. We have a program that might be able to help you find more permanent housing, if you're interested." "I might be," Daniel replied, though housing had never been his priority in the careful rationing of his limited resources. "Do you work here often? Tuesdays and Thursdays?" she said. "And sometimes weekends when they're short-staffed." Daniel nodded, mentally noting the schedule. "I'll think about the program." As Sophia walked away, Daniel felt the fragile seed of hope taking root. Twice now, the universe had placed her in his path. Perhaps it was time to trust that something larger than himself was at work. Sophia couldn't explain her preoccupation with the homeless man from the park. There was nothing particularly unusual about their interaction. She had given away donations before, spoken with countless shelter residents over the years she'd volunteered. Yet something about Daniel lingered in her thoughts, a splinter beneath the skin of her consciousness. "You're distracted," observed Ellie that evening as they prepared dinner in their cramped apartment kitchen. "Something happen at the shelter?" Sophia shrugged, focusing on chopping vegetables with unnecessary precision. Not really. Just saw the guy I gave my blanket to. The sacred blanket? Ellie raised an eyebrow. And nothing. He came to the shelter. He seemed nice. Sophia scraped the vegetables into a sizzling pan. It's just weird to see something so personal being used by someone else, I guess. Ellie studied her roommate with the knowing gaze of someone who had weathered 3 years of shared living space. If you say so. That night, Sophia dreamed of the fire for the first time in years. In the dream, as always, she was 9 years old again, watching flames consume everything she had ever known. But this time, something changed. As smoke filled the hallway of their burning home, she felt a hand clasp hers, strong, certain, anchoring her to safety. Her brother's hand, Daniel's hand. She woke with a start, heart pounding and sheets tangled around her legs. The connection her sleeping mind had made felt simultaneously absurd and perfectly logical. Daniel was a common name. Her brother would be 28 now, potentially the right age. But the chances of him being in the same city, much less crossing paths with her by random chance, were astronomically small. And yet, the next day passed in a fog of distracted thoughts. At her job as a library assistant, Sophia found herself pulling books on reuniting with lost family members, on the foster care system, on the psychological impact of childhood separation. Each search led to more questions than answers. By Thursday, she had convinced herself that her interest was purely humanitarian. Daniel was just someone who needed help, and she was in a position to offer it. The mysterious pull she felt toward him was nothing more than empathy, perhaps intensified by the parallel to her own lost brother. The shelter was busier than usual when she arrived for her shift, a predicted snowstorm driving more people to seek refuge indoors. Sophia scanned the common area as she hung up her coat, telling herself she wasn't looking for anyone in particular. Daniel wasn't there. A strange disappointment settled over her as she went through the motions of her volunteer work, serving food, updating resource lists, listening to residents' stories with practiced compassion. 2 hours into her shift, the shelter doors opened, admitting a blast of frigid air and a dusting of snowflakes along with several newcomers seeking warmth. Daniel was among them, snow melting in his beard and hair, the familiar bulk of her mother's blanket visible beneath his unzipped jacket. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition deeper than their brief acquaintance should allow. He approached her during her break, carrying 2 cups of the shelter's mediocre coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering one to her. "It's not great, but it's hot." Sophia accepted the cup with a smile, noting how his hands seemed less chapped than before. "Thanks. Have you thought any more about the housing program?" Daniel nodded, leaning against the wall beside her. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before. A small scar near his left eyebrow, the way he had of tilting his head slightly when listening. Familiar gestures that teased at her memory. "I filled out the application yesterday," he said. "They're reviewing my case." "That's great," Sophia replied, genuinely pleased. "I hope it works out." A comfortable silence settled between them, unusual given how little they knew of each other. Daniel broke it first. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia nodded, curious. "That blanket you gave me, the patchwork one? There's a square with silver stars. Do you know where it came from?" The question sent an unexpected shiver down Sophia's spine. She had always known the origin of every piece of fabric in that blanket. Her mother had told her the stories countless times, a tactile family history lesson wrapped in warmth. The blue fabric with silver stars had been cut from her brother's favorite pajamas after he had outgrown them. "My brother's pajamas," she said quietly. "From when we were kids?" Daniel's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. A spark of confirmation or recognition. "You have a brother?" "Had," Sophia corrected automatically, then frowned. "I mean, I suppose I still do, technically. We were separated after our parents died. Foster care. I haven't seen him since I was 9. Daniel's knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult." "It was a long time ago," Sophia said, the practiced response coming easily to her lips. "Life goes on, right?" Before Daniel could respond, another volunteer called Sophia's name, signaling the end of her break. She offered an apologetic smile. "Duty calls. Will you be here next week?" "I'll be here," Daniel promised, his voice thick with unspoken words. As she returned to work, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had shifted between them, a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. Daniel spent the weekend in a state of barely contained emotional turmoil. After 10 years of searching, of dead ends and heartbreak, his sister had walked back into his life and handed him a piece of their shared history without recognizing him. The cosmic irony was almost too much to bear. Why hadn't he simply told her who he was? The words had been there, balanced on the tip of his tongue like divers preparing to leap. But fear had held them back. Fear that she wouldn't believe him, that she wouldn't want the complication of a homeless brother disrupting her carefully constructed life, that the tenuous connection they were building would shatter under the weight of revelation. So he had said nothing, choosing instead to gather more information, to approach the truth gradually rather than ambushing her with it. On Monday, Daniel did something he hadn't done in months. He went to the public library, used one of the computers to access his long-dormant email account, and reached out to his former social worker, Angela Reeves. Angela had been the only constant during his years in the system, the only adult who seemed to truly care about reuniting him with Sophia. She had continued to help with his search even after he aged out, until his descent into homelessness had severed that connection like so many others. To his surprise, a response arrived within hours. "Daniel, God, it's good to hear from you. I've been worried sick. Where are you? Are you safe? About your sister, this is incredible timing. I've been trying to find you for months. Sophia contacted me last year, looking for you. She's been searching too. Call me as soon as you can. My number is still the same. Please don't disappear again. Angela." The revelation that Sophia had been searching for him too sent Daniel reeling. All this time, while he had been falling apart, she had been looking. The thought was simultaneously comforting and devastating. They had both been adrift, seeking each other across an ocean of bureaucracy and lost connections. Daniel found a quiet corner of the library and used the public phone to call Angela. The conversation was brief but intense, tears flowing freely as he explained his current situation and the incredible coincidence of his encounter with Sophia. "You need to tell her," Angela urged. "She deserves to know, and so do you." "I will," Daniel promised. "But I need to do it right. Can you send me what you have? Her contact information? Anything about her life now?" Angela hesitated. "Daniel, I can't just hand over her personal information, even to you. There are protocols." "I understand," he said, though disappointment crashed through him. "Then can you at least not tell her about me yet? Let me do this my way?" After a long pause, Angela agreed. "1 week, Daniel. Then I'm calling her." The deadline established, Daniel threw himself into preparation. He used the library's resources to clean up as best he could, taking advantage of a local organization that provided interview clothes for homeless job seekers. He crafted and rehearsed what he would say, how he would prove their connection, how he would apologize for the years of absence despite his childhood promise. By Thursday morning, nervousness had settled into his bones like the winter cold. He arrived at the shelter hours before Sophia's shift was scheduled to begin, the patchwork blanket carefully folded in his backpack, along with the few mementos he had managed to keep throughout his years of transience. A tarnished watch that had belonged to their father, a small photo album with water-damaged but recognizable family pictures, his original birth certificate that established his identity as Daniel Parker. When Sophia finally walked through the shelter doors, cheeks flushed from the cold and snowflakes melting in her dark hair, Daniel's carefully prepared speech evaporated from his mind. She was his little sister, the same girl who had once followed him everywhere, who had believed him capable of anything, who had clung to his hand as they watched their world burn down around them. She spotted him almost immediately, a smile of recognition warming her features as she made her way toward him. "You're here early," she observed, unwinding a scarf from around her neck. Daniel nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "I wanted to talk to you before your shift starts. It's important." Something in his tone must have communicated the gravity of the moment, because Sophia's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Okay, is everything all right? Can we sit somewhere? Somewhere private?" Concern flickered across her face, but she nodded. "The counseling room is empty right now. We can use that." The small room was sparsely furnished but mercifully quiet, the sounds of the busy shelter muffled by its closed door. Sophia took a seat across from Daniel, her posture conveying polite interest tinged with apprehension. Daniel took a deep breath, then unzipped his backpack and carefully removed the patchwork blanket, placing it on the table between them. "The first time I saw this," he began, his voice unsteady, "I recognized it immediately. Not because blankets like this are common, but because I helped make it." Confusion clouded Sophia's features. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I was there when our mother started it. I helped her pick out some of the fabrics." His fingers traced the star-patterned square. "These were from my favorite pajamas. The red plaid was from Dad's old shirt. The yellow flowered piece was from the curtains in our kitchen on Maple Street." Sophia had gone very still, her face pale. "How could you possibly know that?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Because I'm Daniel Parker. I'm your brother, Sophia." The words hung in the air between them, weighty and transformative. Sophia stared at him, her expression cycling through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been hope before settling on wary skepticism. That's not possible," she whispered. "My brother would have found me years ago. He promised he would." The accusation in her words, however unintentional, cut deep. "I tried, Sophia. God, I tried. For years." Daniel reached into his backpack again, withdrawing the photo album and birth certificate, placing them beside the blanket. "I never stopped looking for you." With trembling hands, Sophia opened the water-stained album. The first photo showed a family of 4, mother, father, a boy of about 11, and a little girl missing her front teeth. Their family, whole and happy before tragedy struck. "This could be... You could have found these anywhere," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She turned the pages slowly, each image resurrecting memories long buried. "Ask me anything," Daniel urged. "Anything only your brother would know." Sophia looked up from the album, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What was the name of my stuffed rabbit?" "Mr. Hobson," Daniel answered without hesitation. "He had a tear in his left ear that Mom sewed up with blue thread because you insisted that was the only color that wouldn't hurt him." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek. "What did you promise me? The night of the fire?" Daniel's throat tightened. "I promised I wouldn't let them separate us. I promised I would find you." His voice broke. "I failed at the first promise, but I never stopped trying to keep the second." Something in Sophia's expression crumbled then, the careful wall of disbelief giving way to recognition. "Danny?" she whispered, using the childhood nickname that only family had ever called him. "It's me, Soph," he said, his own tears flowing freely now. "It's really me." What happened next was a blur of emotion, Sophia launching herself from her chair, Daniel rising to meet her, arms encircling each other in an embrace that bridged 10 years of absence in an instant. They clung to each other, sobbing and laughing simultaneously, the patchwork blanket crushed between them. "I thought you were dead," Sophia confessed against his shoulder. "After years of searching and finding nothing, I started to believe you must have died. It was easier than thinking you'd forgotten me." "Never," Daniel vowed fiercely. "Not for a single day." They stayed like that, locked in an embrace that felt like coming home, until a knock at the door reminded them of the world beyond their reunion. Sophia hastily wiped her eyes and called for the person to wait a moment. "I have to start my shift," she said, gathering herself. "But I can't just let you go back out there." "Not now that I've found you." Daniel squeezed her hands. "I'll be right here when you finish. I'm not disappearing again." Sophia nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "Promise?" "I promise," Daniel said, the echo of a childhood vow renewed with adult determination. "And this time I'll keep it." The hours of Sophia's shift crawled by with excruciating slowness. She moved through her tasks mechanically, her mind replaying the revelation again and again. Her brother, alive, found, sitting in the common area of the shelter where she had volunteered for years. The cosmic orchestration required to bring them together after so long felt too precise to be coincidence, too messy to be anything but real life. Several times, she found herself pausing in her work just to look at him across the room, to reassure herself that he hadn't vanished. Each time, Daniel met her gaze with a small smile, a silent affirmation. Still here, not going anywhere. When her shift finally ended, Sophia approached him with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Come home with me," she said, the words somewhere between a question and a command. "I have a pull-out couch. It's not much, but it's perfect," Daniel interrupted. "But are you sure? I don't want to impose." "And your roommate, Ellie, will understand," Sophia assured him, though she wasn't entirely certain this was true. What she did know was that she couldn't bear the thought of her brother spending another night in the shelter or on the streets, not when she had a home to offer. The walk to her apartment was surreal, the familiar route transformed by Daniel's presence beside her. They talked continuously, questions tumbling over each other as they attempted to bridge the decade-long gap in their shared history. After the third foster home, I started running away, Daniel explained as they navigated snow-dusted sidewalks. Trying to find you. They labeled me a problem case after that. Sophia nodded, her own memories rising to meet his. They moved me out of state after the second year. Indiana, then Michigan. By the time I was legally allowed to search for you, the trail was ice cold. I looked everywhere, Daniel said, the old frustration evident in his voice. Every database, every social service. I even hired a private investigator with student loan money I was supposed to use for textbooks. Is that how... Sophia hesitated, unsure how to delicately reference his current circumstances. Daniel understood anyway. How I ended up homeless? Partly. The obsession didn't help. Lost jobs because I'd stay up all night searching online forums for any mention of Sophia Parker. Burned through relationships because I couldn't focus on anything else. He shrugged. Then the economy tanked. I got laid off from my last steady job, couldn't make rent. You know how it goes. One bad month becomes 2, then 6, then you're sleeping in shelters and wondering how your life unraveled so completely. The matter-of-fact way he described his descent broke Sophia's heart. She slipped her hand into his, a silent gesture of solidarity. What about you? Daniel asked. What happened after Michigan? I got lucky, Sophia admitted. My last foster family was decent. Not warm, but stable. They helped me apply for scholarships, supported me going to community college. I'm finishing my degree now, part-time. Library science? Daniel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered features. You always did love books. Some things don't change, Sophia agreed, returning his smile. When they reached her apartment building, Sophia felt a moment of trepidation. Her home was modest at best, a small 2-bedroom in an aging complex, furnished with thrift store finds and discount store basics. How would it look through her brother's eyes? Daniel, however, regarded the simple space with unveiled appreciation. This is nice, he said, taking in the cramped living room with its mismatched furniture and carefully tended houseplants. Really nice. It's not much, Sophia demurred, suddenly self-conscious. It's a home, Daniel replied simply. That's everything. Ellie arrived home an hour later to find them sitting on the floor surrounded by photo albums and mugs of hot chocolate, years of separation dissolving in shared memories and cautious plans for the future. To Sophia's relief, Ellie took the extraordinary situation in stride after the initial shock wore off. Your long-lost brother shows up after a decade, and it turns out he's the homeless guy you gave your mom's blanket to? She summarized after introductions were made. That's either the most beautiful coincidence ever, or proof that the universe has a screenwriter with a flair for the dramatic. Daniel laughed, a real laugh that reached his eyes and reminded Sophia so powerfully of their father that her breath caught. I'm voting for the universe having a sense of humor, he said. A twisted one, but still. That night, after Ellie had retreated to her bedroom and Daniel had settled onto the pull-out couch with the patchwork blanket spread over him, Sophia sat on the edge of the makeshift bed, reluctant to let him out of her sight. I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will have been a dream, she confessed. That I'll have given my blanket to a stranger and you'll still be lost. Daniel reached for her hand in the dim light. I'm real. I'm here. And tomorrow I'll still be here. Promise? Sophia asked, echoing her earlier question with the same childlike vulnerability. I promise, Daniel replied, squeezing her fingers. Get some sleep, Soph. We have a lifetime to catch up on, but it can wait until morning. Reluctantly, Sophia retreated to her own room, leaving the door ajar so she could hear the reassuring sounds of her brother's presence, the creak of the couch as he shifted, the soft rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in years, she slept without dreams of fire or loss. Instead, she dreamed of a patchwork blanket growing larger, new squares being added to represent not just what had been lost, but what had been miraculously found. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rediscovery and adjustment. Daniel moved cautiously in this new reality, afraid of disrupting the life Sophia had built, conscious of his status as both brother and burden. Sophia, in turn, orbited him with protective intensity, as if making up for the years she couldn't shield him from hardship. Ellie observed their gravitational pull with quiet amusement. You two are like binary stars, she commented one evening as they all prepared dinner together, Daniel chopping vegetables with unexpected skill. Constantly checking each other's position, adjusting your own accordingly. Is that a bad thing? Sophia asked, momentarily concerned. Ellie shook her head. Just an observation. It's actually kind of beautiful. With Angela's help, Daniel began navigating the complex systems designed to assist people experiencing homelessness, housing programs, job training, healthcare access. The process was humbling, often frustrating, but Daniel approached it with newfound determination. This time, he wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the second chance he'd been given with Sophia. "I'm going to pay you back," he insisted one evening after Sophia had spent her carefully budgeted grocery money on new clothes for him. "For everything, when I'm back on my feet." Sophia had shaken her head firmly. "This isn't a debt, Danny. This is family." Family. The word held so much weight now, so much meaning between them. It wasn't just the two of them anymore. Their small circle expanded to include Ellie, Angela, the social workers, and shelter volunteers who had become part of their journey. 1 month after their reunion, Daniel received news that changed everything. He had been accepted into a transitional housing program that included job placement services. The apartment was small, essentially a studio, but it represented independence, a foundation from which to rebuild. "I can't believe it," he said, staring at the acceptance letter in disbelief. 6 weeks ago I was sleeping on park benches and now you have a future." Sophia finished for him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You deserve this, Danny. All of it." The day Daniel moved into his new apartment was bittersweet. Though it was only across town from Sophia, both siblings felt the pang of separation acutely, their recently mended bond stretched thin by even this small distance. "You can come over anytime," Sophia assured him as she helped arrange his meager possessions in the sparse space. "Day or night. And I'll be here so often you'll probably get sick of me." Daniel smiled, hanging the patchwork blanket on the wall like a tapestry, a visual reminder of the miracle that had brought them back together. "Not possible. Though I might need some space when the Steelers play the Browns." Sophia laughed, the sound lightening the emotional weight of the moment. "Oh, you're still on that losing team?" "Some things never change." As weeks turned to months, both siblings found their rhythm in this new shared life. Daniel secured a job at a local warehouse, physical work that paid decently and asked few questions about the gaps in his employment history. Sophia continued her studies, now with renewed purpose and the support of her brother's unwavering belief in her potential. They developed traditions, Sunday dinners at Sophia's apartment with Ellie and occasionally Angela, movie nights where they caught each other up on a decade of missed cultural references, quiet evenings simply existing in the same space, the miracle of their reunion never taken for granted. On the anniversary of the fire that had claimed their parents and separated them, they visited the cemetery together for the first time since childhood. Standing before the modest headstones, Daniel placed an arm around his sister's shoulders. "Do you think they know?" Sophia asked softly. "That we found each other again?" Daniel considered this, watching as early spring sunlight filtered through budding trees overhead. "I think they helped make it happen," he said finally. "That blanket was Mom's way of keeping us connected across time and distance. And Dad, well, he always said the Parker stubbornness was our greatest trait and worst flaw." Sophia smiled through her tears. "The stubbornness that kept you searching. And you," Daniel reminded her. "We both kept looking." As they walked back through the cemetery, the weight of grief lightened by shared remembrance, Sophia thought about the extraordinary chain of events that had reunited them. One simple act of kindness, a blanket offered to a stranger on a cold day, had reconstructed what tragedy had torn apart. "I've been thinking," she said as they reached the cemetery gates, "about coincidence and fate and all the things that had to align perfectly for us to find each other." Daniel glanced at her curiously. And I don't think it matters whether it was random chance or divine intervention or cosmic justice," Sophia replied. "What matters is what we choose to do with the second chance we've been given." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding blooming in his eyes. "So what do we choose?" Sophia linked her arm through his, the gesture bridging past and present in a simple touch. "To live, to help others, to turn our story into something that matters beyond just us." And that's exactly what they did. In the years that followed, Daniel and Sophia Parker became advocates for foster care reform and family reunification programs. Daniel's social work degree was finally completed, his first-hand experience of homelessness informing his approach to helping others navigate the system. Sophia's library science expertise led to the creation of a database that helped separated families find each other across state lines and bureaucratic barriers. The patchwork blanket, now carefully preserved in a display case, became the symbol of their non-profit organization, a visual representation of how fractured pieces could come together to create something whole and beautiful and warm. But beyond their public work, beyond the speeches and fundraisers and policy meetings, Daniel and Sophia cherished the private miracle of their reunion. Each shared holiday, each inside joke recovered, each new memory created was a testament to resilience and the enduring power of connection. The orphaned girl who donated a blanket to a homeless man had unknowingly reunited with her lost brother, but what they built from that moment of serendipity was entirely of their own making: a family reconstructed, a future reclaimed, a promise finally kept.